Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 94 of Going Live with Good Soil. We broadcast our discussion live weekly at the same time every week for I think the last 94 weeks now. Maybe there was 1 week we missed, I forget. But yeah, it's been going on a while. And on our Good Soil Investment YouTube channel, live stream, and Twitter Spaces at the same time. So welcome, everyone. We'll talk about macro market, AI developments, and then go into Tesla and Twitter, Elon, some other stocks we follow if there's any news, and then Q&A. And as a disclaimer, none of this is investment advice. We're just talking our opinions on markets and stock, a few companies and stocks and stock movement. So, Matt, how's it going for you this week? Any big macro news for us to talk about that you can think of, or?
I think thankfully it's been a little bit more quiet than usual. We've been talking for like a year and a half about CPI and Fed meetings, and so we do have the Fed decision next week, but
Mhm.
a little bit lighter macro news this week, which I'm okay with, because I'd much rather talk about technology and
Yeah,
companies than macro. I
yeah,
think we've begrudgingly accepted that that's part of the deal,
yeah.
given how much of an impact it's having.
Yeah, absolutely. We much prefer talking about stocks and the businesses they represent versus what Powell and a group of board members of the Fed are deciding in a dark room to do with interest rates that moves the market. So um, we'll be talking about that next week again, I'm sure, a lot when the
Yeah.
Fed meeting happens. But for this week, we'll probably lay off that. And Bitcoin, from a macro perspective, Bitcoin is part of the big package of the future of macro markets, in our opinion. Ethereum, Bitcoin, digital assets, um, and I guess Bitcoin halvening is a big speculation right now. I mean, people are saying the halvening is happening when, next month or something. So,
No, it's April of 24, I believe.
oh,
Um,
okay.
but
April next
it's
year, then next year the
next
halvening.
year.
I remember the
Yeah,
last
yeah.
time the halvening happened, and the time before that I remember too. And people thought it would be like a big trading event, like the actual halvening date. But in my recollection, the actual date of the halvening has not like generated a huge underlying. It's questionable whether the months leading up to it, speculation leading up to it, change direction of the Bitcoin speculative price, but the actual date itself has not seemed to had a major effect on the Bitcoin price in my recollection.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to it has historically anyways been a kind of good indicator of broader kind of longer term bull markets, and so there's of course speculation that could happen again as the supply tightens even further. But I don't know. I think it's reached such a significant market cap, and also the macro uncertainty. I mean, we're no longer in a zero interest rate environment. So I think there's this open question of, is Bitcoin a digital gold, a risk off kind of asset that it
Hmm.
helps you to insulate from like the dollar losing reserve currency status, for example. That's like the big bulk thesis.
Yeah.
But if you look at like the trading movements, it's highly correlated with growth assets. So the Gary Blacks of the world will say, no, this is a highly risk on asset, where you essentially just have to sell it to somebody else at a higher price, and there's no intrinsic value underlying it. So I think both you and I are probably more sympathetic to the first camp.
Yeah.
But that's much more of a longer term trend, and we're certainly no kind of Bitcoin hyper bulls.
No.
But I don't know. It's been interesting to watch it rally so far, this year, and I think it was actually going into last year a bit. The rally started,
Hmm.
um, but it's so hard to tell when these cycles might start or stop. I mean, there's history of all these happenings, then that's obviously been a catalyst historically. But looking at Ethereum, for example, there were a lot of people, myself included, who thought that the um,
The
switch
fork.
from proof of work to proof of stake would be a
Mhm.
really significant like rallying point for that, as you went from an inflationary supply to a deflationary supply, and there was essentially like a net almost like a constant net outflow that changed like the actual trading flows of Ethereum. So if that thesis was true, not only would you expect a rally, which we did see, but you would expect a rally relative to Bitcoin, which we have not seen.
Mhm.
So the
Mhm.
fact that it hasn't really gained share and instead has just kind of remained correlated with other, crypto assets and frankly other high growth assets, tells me that the market is still kind of undecided on this. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, I still believe Bitcoin has a place as a digital gold form factor for, millennials and Gen Z even. So as wealth transfers to younger generations, I could see Bitcoin, not just digital gold, but also insurance. That's probably the
Hmm.
the simplest way I think about it as well, is insurance against the dollar and
Yeah.
fiat, currency. So that's what gold is also largely insurance against too, right? So it's sort of like a digital gold. Um, so yeah, I could see Bitcoin having a moment again soon, where it just starts steadily rising to 50K plus, and it has nothing to do with the halvening, but that'll be maybe the narrative, because it's a good narrative to show like something kind of new to people who are relatively new to Bitcoin to think about. But I just think just the overall trend of a lot more people trying to just have a small piece of it. People buy Bitcoin. Too many people are getting a small piece of Bitcoin with the intention of never selling it. It has been speculative. With the volatility brings speculation, but that speculative trading aspect of Bitcoin has been kind of flushed out to a large degree, in my opinion. And now a lot of the Bitcoin holders or owners are not speculative traders like day traders or even swing traders.
Hmm.
They're more people like me or who are other people that have a small amount that just intend to hold it almost indefinitely with no plans to sell it. So I think we'll see
Yeah.
a little more of that, and that'll just naturally drive the price up because such limited supply. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
that is interesting. As more and more people kind of think that, yeah, that's a reasonable thing to hold as an insurance policy, and MicroStrategy obviously continues to buy more and more. And
Yeah.
there was this theory that we'd see more, Teslas of the world and corporate treasuries and governments starting to hold this, and that trend really hasn't panned out. I mean, there's been
No,
a
it has
handful
not.
here or there, but that's I still do think that that might happen over time, but
Could. It could.
it's definitely not a slam dunk, and especially in the
Regulators are gonna
US
try
with
to
the
stop that.
regulators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regulators are gonna stop as much as they can of any Bitcoin adoption on an institutional level, right? But I still
Hmm.
think you can't stop people like me and you or individuals from holding some of this code on a USB key somewhere in their safe, So I think you'll still see some of that. You're a bank safe deposit box like me. Hopefully that bank safe deposit box is not gonna have a bank run and I'll lose it or something. So, uh, who knows? Who knows?
I don't think
So
that safe deposit boxes go in a bank run, but
I hope not. I
your
don't think
point
they
as
do.
well.
Yeah, I don't think they should. Yeah.
In a zombie apocalypse, though, it's like how do you handle that to get back to the bank and get it out? So that's I don't
Yeah.
know. It's interesting the levels of sophistication of the various crypto holders, because it is a unique asset class in terms of what you need to do if you want to self custody.
Hmm.
It's a little bit more complicated. But then if you go with the Coinbase, then there's always the risk that there could be some regulatory action to prevent you from actually using it. So
Yeah.
it's a tricky situation.
Yeah. And it's
I think
such a
hard.
crazy when you take a step back in history. Bitcoin was created like I don't know 15 years ago, something like that. So just like something was created out of thin air, a digital store of value created out of thin air. If Bitcoin is indeed here to stay as a digital gold, what a phenomenal point in history just to create a new asset class, digital asset class like that out of thin air, sort of like the first person to do it created it. And it was just meant to be. It was going to happen sooner or later. And now it's like a thing. So it's just a phenomenal big picture zoom out phenomenon, I feel like, in the whole human civilization in a way.
Yeah, well, and I mean, just with the Satoshi Nakamoto and like the whole Immaculate Conception, I mean, that really is a hell of a story.
Mhm.
I'm clearly not a Bitcoin maximalist, but there's something really magical about that story, and just the
Yeah.
fact that like he's gone, like all these tokens were never touched essentially, and we don't
Yeah.
know who he was, and it's just like this gift to the world that was left. I mean, it really is
Yeah.
a phenomenal story,
I was
regardless of what you think about the cryptocurrency itself.
yeah. I was talking to a friend just a couple days ago about that, and do you think like the new auto GPT 5, or 6 or whatever the AGI technology that could be created, or just just this advanced generative AI, do you think it could figure out who Satoshi, just from all the breadcrumbs that us humans have no capability of being able to figure out, but just from like all the email trails and the style of writing, you maybe it can figure out who are the most likely candidates for who Satoshi Nakamoto really was. Do you think that's possible?
That's interesting. I think it would certainly be possible to create like a pool of candidates and maybe probability weight them.
Yeah, I would
I
think
think that
that's
would be
what they do
possible.
first. Yeah,
Yeah. So I don't know, but it's possible if there just is not a trail of breadcrumbs,
enough. Yeah,
then even the smartest possible intelligence couldn't figure out something like that. So
yeah.
yeah, I'll be interested to see how this develops over time.
Yeah, like there's certainly enough content with me and you on YouTube. Like if you have all the digital transcripts with how we talk, or just our emails, if people had seen, the AI had access to our level of all of our emails that we've done, and if I was to type an anonymous email in some real anonymous way to somewhere that was more than like 500 words, I bet like the digital future AI could detect, oh, that's Emmett Peppers. That's how he writes exactly. Like so. I wonder if it'll be able to use that type of pattern recognition with language to figure out, to reverse engineer who Satoshi Nakamoto might have been, if there's enough data. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's really a curiosity more than,
Yes.
super useful information. But yeah, it would be interesting. It's just like some random person that nobody's ever heard of that was just,
Yeah. We found out who it is. It was Microsoft C-level manager engineer. This person created it. That'd be so crazy.
got hit
Yeah.
by a bus shortly after,
Yeah.
the white paper or something like that. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, you got to imagine. I mean, what is their holdings worth? Hundreds of millions of dollars or billions, presumably.
Probably.
I
Yeah.
mean,
That's enormous. If they're still alive or they didn't lose it or something. Yeah. I don't.
yeah. So I would imagine, no matter how principled you are, it's just it seems more likely that you're dead than you're that principled after creating this
Yeah.
thing out of thin air.
Yeah, I mean, if you win the lotto, there's like that whole curse. Like, if you win the lotto, you're like cursed and probably on a road to just self destruction pretty soon. So, hopefully, that whoever created the Bitcoin white, was not of the same psyche as most people who can win the lottery and on a path of self destruction after that with their wealth. So maybe we'll know one day.
It's an
Yeah,
interesting idea.
yeah. So yeah, the auto GPT stuff that is fascinating. That seems to quickly be taking over and displacing the plugins. I was sort of interested in the plugins. Now there's auto GPT stuff, and I think you and I we talked briefly, and we're fascinated by it, but we haven't actually got our hands on using it yet. But we want to, and I think at some point, maybe in the next week or two, we can try to. I'm gonna really try to start using it just for fun, maybe to create some like pretend Tesla commercials or something. I heard it's a good tool for that, and then we can talk more about it once we've like used it a little bit. But it seems to be a really big step change in the GPT tech is the auto GPT, where you have these agents that do everything for you. You don't have to prompt it. You just give it like an overall mission, and then it just goes to work on its own or something, right?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that got me so excited about AI maybe 5 or 6 years ago was the idea that it could recursively self improve. So it can go from being like chimp level intelligence to human level intelligence to Einstein level intelligence in like just a matter of time. This is a similar sort of principle, but with the same static level of intelligence, it can just continue to refine the goals that you're feeding it. And so you like you mentioned, it can have several different agents acting in concert to achieve one particular mission. And then as they get feedback from those agents of, let's say you're trying to plan a trip to Japan and you want it to like find the tickets and plan an itinerary. So like you could have an AI that's like trying to create a list of hotels that they could possibly stay in. Then they get a list of hotels and they figure out, okay, this one doesn't fit in the budget. And so then they refine and then they can go through the process. And you can have another one that does like a booking agent. So it's this ability to handle all these complicated steps. And instead of like Chat GPT, you need to interact with it at every single step of the way. It's not really well suited for actually handling real world tasks right now. The fact that Auto GPT can kind of adjust on the fly and retrain it, not necessarily retrain itself, but reprioritize its objectives. That's super exciting. And I think it's very clear, like this is very early innings. I mean, a lot of the stuff that it does is more, I think, important as a demonstration of what's coming than is super useful today. I mean, just as an example, it's you need to be pretty technical in order to go to GitHub and download all the software you need and figure out how to do it. I spent like 20 minutes trying to figure it out, and I was like, all right, it would probably take me a day to actually do all this stuff the right way. So I kind of gave up on it. But it's like the future's coming fast. There's certainly going to be more user-friendly applications that can mimic these things, but in real time with a much better user interface. And so I'm just thinking through the economic implications of that is like really staggering.
Yeah, very staggering. And like we prefaced last week, there's some stocks I think that people need to start businesses, and then there's stocks, right, that you need to kind of keep an eye on if you're an investor and you're looking to get a piece of this new generative AI technology revolution, going on. We kind of like Microsoft. We mentioned that, but this is just not a recommendation. This is just our, opinions. Obviously, we're not investment advisors. Just another disclaimer. But Microsoft is a huge business conglomerate of a lot of things. It's hard to really have a pure play on this, I would say. But because
Mhm.
OpenAI is such a big part of this new technology revolution, and Microsoft owns like half of it, and is going to get huge benefits from what OpenAI is creating, we think it's still a nice play almost for us, and our, just to consider. There's others. Actually, if anyone in the comments or anyone has any pure play ideas, like we like Roblox is more of a pure play for the coming, what the metaverse might be. So if anyone has a pure play, like you can't buy Minecraft, that's part of Microsoft. You can't buy Epic Games unless you buy it on the private market. It's not publicly traded. You can buy Rocket Lab as a pure play on the space industry, right? But you can't buy SpaceX private. So Microsoft is one of the ideas we have. I guess you could also argue Google, maybe, or maybe someone wants to argue Facebook. I don't know enough about what Facebook is doing there, but if anyone has any interesting pure play ideas, Palantir, someone says, for the infrastructure. I'm not sold on Palantir. I haven't been. I could be wrong. Could be something, but we'd be curious just to dive into a couple pure play ideas on this.
Yeah, it is interesting. I would not say Palantir is a pure play. I mean, they're really selling software, and they'll say that AI is a big piece of it, but
Hmm.
I'm not sure that they're exactly on the cutting edge of all the latest. I think if you look at what OpenAI has done and how like they're very clearly on the cutting edge, that's what I think is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Microsoft has their earnings after the close today, so I'm curious to see what they say about that, and whether the stock reacts positively or negatively, and uh, regardless of what the Q1 numbers are, I'm sure that OpenAI is a very small part of that. But I would be very very interested in just the commentary of what they're seeing with it, how they think it might impact their business going forward. So yeah, definitely looking forward to listening to that call and seeing seeing what happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, and so I held a poll on Tesla advertising. This is something we've been debating a lot, or you and I are the same view, so we're not really debating anyone. We're just like beating the drum ourselves. But we have debated on Twitter a few times. A few people just tried to politely engage people who are against advertising. I think of it as educating the public, not really traditional advertising. A public education campaign to the masses, like not to the Tesla Twitterverse and software engineer people that are already using Twitter, or already into new technology. I'm talking to like just regular average people that are watching, live sports on TV or cable
Hmm.
news, even, or whatever. There's huge, the majority of the population is still engaged in that medium as their main source of information, I would say. And so I think, I feel strongly about it. I've been talking. The more I think about it, the more strong. So I held a poll. I was like, all right, let me see. People are very divisive on it, and my followers represent a lot of Tesla people in the Tesla Twitter sphere, right? And so
Yeah.
I felt it would be a good poll to see within the Tesla Twitter sphere. And there was, looks like there were 75,000 views, but only just under 5,000 people voted, which is interesting to me. Usually when I hold a poll, I have like, people vote maybe at half the rate of the views or something like that. So this is really odd that very few of the people, but the choices were, would you I don't know if you can see it on maybe what I'm talking about, Matt, if you are able to share your screen and find that tweet just so people, because I don't know if you can, but the question was, if you are a Tesla shareholder, would you donate to fund a Tesla educational commercial campaign, GoFundMe? And please retweet so Elon Musk can see results too, hopefully. That's what I put in the parentheses. So, 80 retweets, and which was nice, and 75,000 views. And the options were $1 to $10 was the first option. Matt's going to pull it up, I think, on the YouTube live. So the four options were $1 to $10, $10 to $100 or more, no way, never, or not available. See results. I always like to have that not available see results option, because some people just aren't comfortable answering. They just want to see what the result was, and they want to click something, and then I don't want them to be just
Yeah.
ingenuous. So I give that option out there always on my polls.
Always.
So
That's for public service announcement. Like, always give a throwaway answer as number 4 if you're doing a Twitter poll, because you're right. It's otherwise you're going to definitely skew the results.
Yeah. So you have to discount that from the results, right? So 22% said that. So of the 78% that answered, more than half, a little more than half, said no way, never. And for different reasons, though. I read all the comments. A large amount of the no way, never people were saying no way. Obviously there's people that say no way, Tesla should never advertise, right? But a large people said no. A large amount of the no way, never people, if I dove into it, I would imagine said no way, never, because they just felt it was ridiculous. Like, Tesla should advertise, but they're not going to give any money to it. You know what I mean? So it's because of that, I would think the majority of people that are Tesla in the Tesla Twitterverse actually think Tesla should be advertising, and are willing. And of those people, the majority of those people are willing to donate. So a minority of those people would not donate, even though they think Tesla should advertise. But a majority of those people would donate between 1 and 10, or 10 and 1,000, 10 and $100 or more, and that was equal. I just wanted to find some numbers. And then there was a lot of people in the comments and that thread and other threads, and even DMs that came to me like, "Hey, I donate substantially more than $1,000." So there's a lot of outliers to the upside even. And if you do the math, basically, this is like an indication of interest. In financial terms, there's something called indications of interest. If you study the Series 7 or 6, I'm just thinking of that. Like, when you're putting out a prospectus or of a new offering or something, you want to gauge indications of interest. You have to go through. So this is like an informal indications of interest, kind of to see how much funds could be raised in my mind. And, just doing some rough math on this, the 10 to 100, there was about 1,000 people that voted that, of the people that voted there. So just on the people that voted, that saw the poll, there could at least be, I think, hundreds of thousands of dollars raised. But I think realistically, I would put, I'm trying to gauge which amount of zeros could realistically be raised for some Tesla advertising campaign from the investor share base. And I would think in the single digit millions is a lock. Like, if someone really wanted to run with this, I would think in the single, because if you got a little more widespread, broadcast of this type of message and a GoFundMe campaign, that if it was real, people would retweet it more versus just like a hypothetical poll that I did, And so I think if you have that, and then the outliers, and then all the people who would catch on just from more viralness of such a, there's a huge amount of, I would think single digit millions is probable. I'm not sure if I'm going to run with it yet. I'm thinking about it, but anyone could run with it. And then just create an educational campaign. It doesn't even have to reference the word Tesla, but you could be talking about, if you're concerned about legal things, you could actually, mention the word Tesla and Tesla. You could even just like reference electric cars, but everyone, put it in a way that everyone knows you're sort of talking about Teslas, and have a commercial on like the NBA finals. It'd probably be too quick to do it on the NBA finals, which is coming up in like a month or two, but like some big sporting event, it'd be kind of cool to see how viral it could actually go. I don't know. Well, I'll stop there for a minute, Matt. You're probably going to agree, but is there anything you think critical, or anything you think critical about that?
So I'll just pull one of the comments that somebody just posted. In the on the YouTube comments, somebody says, went down here somewhere. Well, basically they're saying, why would anyone donate to a company with 20 billion in cash? LOL, they can afford it. So how would you respond to that point of view? Which is reasonable, right? Like, this
That's a
is not
reasonable
our
point of view, and that's
responsibility.
fair. Yeah, it's not a
Yeah.
responsibility. That's a very reasonable point of view, and it's fair. You're allowed to have that point of view, but it is a binary thought. Okay, I like to classify thinking in terms of binary thinking and like thinking of in terms of a dial or spectrum of choices,
Probabilistic and yeah.
probabilistic, And so when you think binarily, you think black or white, ones or zeros, yes or no. And a lot of engineers kind of get trapped in that thinking too. A lot of smart people even get trapped in that thinking, I see. So when you say, why would anyone, that's like saying never or always in a way, And so that's like binary thoughts, right? So you got to think, why would most people not do, and then you have to look at the data right here. And so there is a segment of the population, and the percentages are in this poll result right here, representative, I would say somewhat, that will be willing to pay. And you have to look at that data and not have cognitive dissonance of that data and realize like this could actually happen, even if a lot of people disagree and have that same viewpoint you have, and that's a fair viewpoint to have. But to think everyone has that same viewpoint is a binary thought, in my opinion. But it's worthy to mention that.
Yeah, yeah. It's just so frustrating to me. I mean, somebody else in the comments just says Elon is all about data collection, and if you just start and collect that data and it doesn't bear fruit, then stop. What's the
Yeah.
downside? And that's like exactly
Yeah.
what you and I have been
Yeah.
saying for months now. Like very clearly, the downside of price cuts is that your margins get hit. We're seeing that now in action. It's going to continue into Q2 and beyond.
Yeah.
So like we know the cost of that. We also understand that in the longer term, the mission is to have lower cost vehicles, and so we're not against that. We're just saying if the reason demand is at a relative low right now compared to last year is just because of investor or owner misinformation, people have range anxiety and all these things that we know are not actually a problem. Let's
Yeah.
just try educating the public for the first time ever in Tesla's
Yeah.
history and see if it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. I mean, there's quote unquote infinite demand. You know what? You could say there's quote unquote infinite demand about any car. If any car was lowered the price to $1, it'd have infinite demand, So like that infinite demand or actionable demand is that doesn't mean anything to me. It's all a function of price and supply and demand at a certain price points, right? That's basic economics 101. So, it's the first thing they teach you in any economics course. It's the most principled thing of capitalism, supply and demand at given prices, but in conjunction with that, you have to have awareness. Like the public have to be aware that there's actual price at a price to be looked at and an actual product. You have to be aware of the product and the price. Otherwise, no one's there to even look at to consider buying it, right? And so we're sort of in that realm right now where over half the public that can afford a Tesla, whether it's 80% of the public, 90% of the public, or 60% of the public, it's definitely over half the public that can afford a Tesla. I think it's closer to 80 or 90% of people that can afford a Tesla are largely unaware of the value proposition that Tesla brings, the obvious value. And the impact report that Tesla put out is just that's right there. Like there's a huge value propositions embedded of why Teslas are superior in that impact report. But guess what? That's circulating amongst Tesla YouTubers. That's it.
Yeah.
All of us on
Yeah.
this audience, we're all aware of it. But the general public, 80 to 90% of people who can afford a Tesla have no idea about the safety, the fuel saving, how it's the same cost as a Toyota Corolla over 5 years, a Model 3. So it's like, it's crazy to me that Tesla does not, I understand affordability and the Gen 3 platform, that's what that's for. Yes, that's what that's for. But the Model 3 and the Model Y, you could afford to keep margins where they are now if you just educate the public. And this would accelerate the mission even further, right? It would accelerate even further than otherwise would, because you wouldn't be wiping out the competition. So by squeezing margins out of them all and suffocating all of them, I think what was the company? GM's not doing the Bolt anymore. There's other anecdotal things of certain legacy automakers scaling back their EV plans already, and that's going to continue to happen. And that might make them go bankrupt sooner, or later, actually. I don't know you can argue that, but it's going to make them focus again on what they think is their bread and butter, the ICE, because they feel like they can't even survive in an EV ecosystem. And guess what? They might even try to spread more FUD about EVs and delay the mindset of the public's transition to EVs. So I think this is not good for the acceleration. I don't think public education is necessary for Tesla to succeed. I don't think it's needed, but it certainly would help accelerate the mission overall, I think.
Yeah. No, I certainly agree. And I think we've been talking about this, every week for the last month. So it's, but it's like, it just seems so much more obvious now. I mean, we have the Q1 results for the first time now. And it's like, wow, yeah, that definitely hurt. Zach was very clear that they missed because they weren't expecting, price cuts. And that's continuing. I mean, obviously the the second round of price cuts that he mentioned that dragged down the results for Q1. That's going to have an impact in Q2. That's going to be bigger than the Q1 impact, and they also had the price cuts on top of that. And
Yeah.
so, like, I just think that going into this year, I was so convinced that U.S. demand would not be a problem because of the IRA. But it seems also very clear to me that most people have no idea about the IRA and more broadly how cost
Yeah.
competitive, a
Yeah.
Model 3 plus the
Yeah.
IRA incentive or a Model Y plus the IRA incentive is
Yeah.
compared to any comparable ICE vehicle. And then on top of that, adding in the fuel savings and the safety benefits and all that stuff. It's just like the only explanation for this low demand in my mind is just that people are afraid of something new, something scary. I don't want to figure it out. But
Yeah.
it's irrational. It's irrational
It's
fears that I think are
irrational.
capping demand.
Yeah, exactly. And to Steelman, the other side, who are like, why are you guys arguing for advertisements? Or, I think of it as public education. One point that, is somewhat valid is that we manage money, right? And then other people like Gary Black or Ross Gerber manage money and they're against it. So there is a higher likelihood that you would be in favor, I think, of not sacrificing near-term margins with price cuts versus advertising. I do agree that if you are managing other people's money, there is more pressure to see the stock not go down so
Sure.
much, right?
Yeah.
There certainly is validity to that point. I agree, so there's a conflict of interest potentially there, but I try to step back from that and think from my own personal savings accounts, which is most of my vast majority of my wealth is Tesla stock, not even Tesla options, just Tesla stock. And I have all this Tesla stock and it's sitting there. And I still think Tesla should educate the public. I would like that. I don't feel as strongly about it because it's like I know in 5 or 10 years Tesla's going to be 10 times more, but I still think Tesla has a duty to be the leader and represent the leader of EV technology and transition by advertising to the public. They can well afford it. Why not test it out? Like, enough of this silliness of ignoring it. How big do you have to get? How many more price cuts do you need to do until you actually decide to educate the public a little better? Like, what if they lower prices to $30,000 for a brand new Model 3, and so their margins are zero, even though they're producing twice as many of them? But what if the public still isn't buying them at too many of them because they aren't even aware that the Tesla Model 3 is 30,000? What if you surveyed half the people in your neighborhood and they still think it's $100,000 car? That's probably going to be the case. And that's just ridiculous in my mind. Like, just advertise the price that you changed. I don't know. Like, there's a couple news articles that go around, but not everyone's aware of these, electric news articles. We all know
Yeah.
about it. We tell our friends and family maybe, but that's just 90% of the public's outside our bubbles. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
even of like people that I talk to who know I'm like a Tesla bull, and I tell them stuff from time to time. When it comes to like actually making the purchase decision, for the most part, they're not doing it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like even of those who have an opportunity to be better informed, they're just not. So
Yeah.
um, it
And one
is.
last point. One last point on this. I see a lot of comments in the Twitterverse, Tesla Twitterverse, that are against it, saying like, an advertisement has never made me buy a car. I don't think it would make anyone buy a car, all those advertising. But you know what? A car decision that's a binary thought again. A car decision is made up of multiple data points, that you get over time, right? You get lots of data points that lead to your curiosity about something. Okay. So you got to provide the data points so a consumer can actually become curious about the Tesla more than they are already. Right. And so if you give them enough data points to where they're curious, then they search more data points. Then the culmination of data points readies them to a new technology that they would otherwise not do, So that's all. I mean, it's not the commercial, educational commercial itself is not going to sell by itself. You can't, that's a binary thought. So that's what I just want to get that across.
Well, and the other thing I would say, and we really have beat this to death, but I
Yeah.
think it really is important. The, you know, you may have never bought a car because of a commercial, and that's because all the other car companies don't really have anything to talk about. Like you
Yeah.
talk like the Lincoln commercials with Matthew McConaughey. It's like a lifestyle brand. That's like their little niche. Otherwise they're like these stupid like little like skits essentially, or like something with it's like sex heavy or just like really poor marketing that's not going to resonate with many people. But with Tesla, like people generally or genuinely don't know like about EVs. It's a brand new thing that people actually like would be learning about. And it's
Hmm.
not just one thing either. Like we said before, it's safety, it's, you know, the environment, it's like it's the
Convenience,
benefit, the convenience, it's the technology. So like there's all
over
these
the air
different angles
updates.
that
Yeah,
people just
everything.
have no idea about. So
Yeah.
like it's not really comparable to what legacy auto is doing with advertisements in my mind. It's a
Yeah.
separate thing.
Yeah, it's like you're selling people. Like I use this refrigerator and oven. Like people, are, oh yeah, they're all everyone's reformatting their kitchens every time, and everyone knows about ovens and so forth. But now you're selling a refrigerator, and it's in the kitchen, but it's a new thing. It's also used in the kitchen to cook and prepare foods in some ways or whatever. But it's a new thing, and like you have to explain it to people before they buy it. They have to know that it exists before they buy it. I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
it serves a similar function. It's not That's not a great example, but it serves the same function of getting you from A to B, but it's an entirely different technology for it. So it's
Yeah.
just it's sad. It's tragic. A disaster that could be prevented, in my opinion. That's what
Yeah.
tragedy means, and so it's very tragic. And long term, I'm okay, but it's just it's frustrating. To watch unfold this way. And maybe Elon has other reasons. My conspiracy thinking is that he doesn't want the stock price to rise anytime soon because he wants to keep the talent he has now to finish full self driving. If the stock was to go up, 3x or 4x or 5x again suddenly, maybe he'd lose a lot of talent. People that
Yeah.
with stock options. So that's one theory I have. I don't know. Who
Can
knows?
we take a little detour on full self driving actually?
Yeah,
Because
yeah. Let's do that.
Elon yet again said it'll be solved by the end of this year. Like yet
Hmm.
again, I rolled my eyes. This latest 11.3.6, first 2 days I took it out was just like a total disaster. I think I actually tweeted the very first drive I had. It was just 4 turns that I had to make like around my neighborhood,
Oh,
and like out onto a couple busy streets. And every single time it was just like a total disaster. I mean, like the first turn, like there was just very clear that there was no room to go. As soon as the traffic cleared from the left, it started going, even though like traffic from the right was like a constant stream. And I was like, that's like
yeah,
horribly dangerous. Not horribly dangerous because I
yeah.
was in
Oh,
charge, but just like
yeah,
very clearly a bad decision.
yeah,
And lots of other just weird situations like that too. And in particular, there are these two like turn lanes. There's one like a right turn lane into my neighborhood where every time it's turning right, it just like like veers to the left into the other lane of traffic, which is obviously
yeah.
not good. So it was consistently doing that. And there was another similar situation in a different road that had consistently for like a year had the same problem. And within the same version, 11.3.6, those issues just went away after a couple days. And like the entire driving experience got drastically better for me. Um,
Mhm.
and it seems like the improvements are actually coming within a software update rather than waiting for a new update to come that, fixes most things. So I don't know. I mean, we're on this new integrated stack, with version 11. You've got neural nets doing almost everything now. I maybe we actually are getting close to the point where there's all the delays have been because they needed to rewrite the software.
Yeah.
Now maybe it can just be optimizing, the decision making parameters within that software. So, what's your thought on how realistic is like being solved by the end of the year, or even just
Yeah.
what's your thoughts more generally on the pace
Yeah.
of change and when we get to full autonomy?
I too, Matt, have had a similar experience to what you just described, which is I was reinstated for FSD beta with the newest version. I used it the first time and I was like, there's still some errors that are basic and I was nervous about. And I was like, well, I guess we're still kind of just reformatting the stack and, one step back to. But then, like 2 days later or 3 days later, I'm using it again. I'm like, well, these problems aren't happening. What's going on? And then the next day, even less problems. And it's like, it's iterating, it's getting better and better, like faster and faster. So I
Yeah.
too think like, are we at a crazy step change going on here with the FSD beta um, driving where like to the point where the other day my wife test is much harder than anyone else's wife test, I would say. Like I know Farzad said he passed the wife test like, a month ago or something like
Yeah.
that. And I
I'm
don't know
with you
about
on that
you.
too.
Okay.
Very,
My
very
wife test
similar.
is
My wife
like,
just hates it when it's on because it's a
yeah,
little
mine
jerky
is
and Yeah.
Yeah, mine is like level 4 of the CFA exam, or so I don't know. It's like impossible to
The
pass.
secret level
Okay.
beyond level 3.
Yeah, yeah. So my wife test it just recently passed the highway wife test to some, with a barely passing grade. But part of it is also, it's comparing my driving to, and my driving is not that great on its own. So that's the only hope that it has to pass the wife test. So the FSD beta, I feel like, is at the point where it's about to pass my wife test, because she gets so frustrated when we're in a hurry or something. She gets so frustrated with the I'm driving. She'll be like, "Get to that left lane. Why don't you get to that left lane?" I'm like, "Okay, I'll drive." It's like almost like a backseat driver. Sometimes I'm like, stop ordering me around. I don't say that, of course. I don't want to have a, but when we're late to something or we have to be on time, just
Does she watch this, by the way? Is there any chances of
no,
getting back to
no,
her?
she doesn't watch this.
Okay.
No, no. So, just the other night I was driving. We were going somewhere for our anniversary, and we were kind of running late. And I'm driving myself, and I'm like, sort of purposely like being a little herky jerky, just because I want to prepare her for an informal wife test, because she doesn't
Yeah.
like the herky jerky. No one likes that. They get especially if
Yeah.
they're trying to look at their phone for a second. They're just like, "What are you making me sick?" You know. And so I'm like purposely pretending I'm just like being my nerve, or I'm a conservative driver, and I don't get in many accidents, and so then I put on the FSD beta, and she sort of knows, like, this gives the eye roll. She doesn't like it, but then it's actually going smooth, and I can see the wheels in her mind turning, like, maybe this is better than Emmett driving, like, and so like I can see the wheels turning. I don't want to put words in her mouth, because you have to let the people, you have to build the bridge and let them come over the
Yeah.
bridge for negotiations. So I'm trying to build the bridge to let her come over the bridge. So I
So
think
you're
in
setting the
another one,
bar low. You've got
yeah,
your
I
thumb on
think,
the scale a little bit, to
yeah,
be
yeah. I
honest.
think in another one or two of those events, I think she'll say, I prefer the I think she'll on her own say, Emmett, put on the FSD beta. I prefer it over your driving. So I think
Oh,
I'm
that's
very
funny.
close. I'm very close. Yeah.
That's funny.
So
Oh,
FSD
that's
beta
really
is
interesting.
getting that good. Yeah. I have the hardest wife test of all. And I think it's very close to passing that.
Yeah, it's really surprising. I mean, like I've always tried to be very neutral about it, and I've always kind of thought we're like, 3 years away at any given point. Like in
Yeah.
2021, I thought we were probably 3 years away from achieving it. And
Yeah.
a month ago, I would have said we're still 3 years away. But I don't if this rate of improvement really comes to fruition, then it's possible. Like I could see it at some point next year. We get like limited approval within some geography,
Yeah.
which maybe that's a good transition to talk about the ARK Invest model. Do we spend a couple minutes
Yeah.
talking about that?
Yeah.
So they
Let's talk about that.
recently published their newest evaluation model.
They
Base
do this
case
every year,
is,
right? Yeah. Every
yep.
year around this time.
And they always go out 5 years. So now it's a 2027 target. Their
Mhm.
base case model is a share price of $2,000, which is pretty pretty out there. Although I think a couple of years ago when I did a model that included robotaxi valuation, I was coming up with around $1,000 pre-split, or sorry,
Mhm.
post-split. So kind of similar. Their bear case is $1,400, and their bull case is $1,500. It's a Monte Carlo simulation, which a lot of people have spoken about in detail, the pros and cons of that. So I won't go into that too much. But some of the things that kind of stuck out to me is that their best case scenario for a robotaxi launching is in Q4 of this year. Which again, like a month ago, if you'd asked me, I'd say like, well, that's just ridiculously optimistic. There's no chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I could see some limited geography or something approving it there if the technology really improves. Now,
Yeah.
maybe that's only a 1% probability, but still, like I could see it at least happening now. It's not zero.
Mhm.
But I think their base case is in 2025, if I'm reading this correctly, and their worst case is 2030. So the interesting
Okay.
thing to me is that all their different scenarios assume a robotaxi valuation component. So to your point earlier about like binary thinking or binary probabilities, like a robotaxi network will either happen or it won't. And so
Yes,
that's
that's a
kind of the way
binary thing. Yeah.
that I have always thought about the valuation is like you value the core business and then you also value the autonomy business. And then you have to ascribe a probability to
Yes.
the robotaxi business. To It doesn't look like they're doing that here. And so, for example, like in their worst case scenario, they're still assuming that let me see, lost it here. Where did it go? Well, it's not their worst case scenario. They have a bear case that's like an example output. So Monte Carlo simulation is like thousands of different scenarios or hundreds.
Mhm.
So this is not like representative of like a single bear case. It's just one of their probable outcomes. But in one of their bear cases in 2027, they're assuming 10.3 million cars sold, which strikes me as very high for a bear case, especially
Yeah.
given some of
Yeah.
the lithium constraints and that sort of thing. And their gross margin is 51%. Now, obviously, that's related to autonomy,
Yeah.
but like their
Doesn't sound like the
bulk
bear case to me.
exactly, like their bull case is 52% gross margin, their bear case is 51% gross margin. So
Yeah.
like to me, there's a lot of room to miss. Could I see this scenario panning out? Absolutely, but
Hmm.
it's not the way that I would have structured like a base and a bear case,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah. No,
So
I think that is true. I think you have to have some probability prescribed to the full self-driving for your main case, but I think for the bear case you want to have very low probability of FSD coming to fruition. Like the bear case is like, this is as far as it gets where we are right now, and it's just like an advanced driver assistance that has like 5 to 10% take rate, I feel like that's
mhm,
the real bear case, if you want to put that on, and I
yeah.
I don't think they've modeled that as their bear case. It doesn't seem like.
So maybe a little bit of breaking news on the banking front. I think First Republic, it was either yesterday or last week, announced earnings. It was really bad,
Yeah.
but right now it's tumbling as we are speaking. It's down 44% today. So we
Oh
may
my
be
gosh.
in the middle of, in the last hour or 45 minutes or so, it's really taken a steep decline down. So we may not be out of the woods on the banking crises, and I'm curious to see if that drags other stuff down with it, and whether the Fed might react differently. Sorry, I got some noise.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, this banking crisis may be having part two happen soon. We'll find out. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm going to dive more into the ARK Invest model myself, but I do like that they do the Monte Carlo layout for their overall kind of price point. I guess our concern is like the bull case of the I mean, the bear case of the Monte Carlos. Are those really the bear case Monte that are that should be used? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the tricky things when I've done Monte Carlo simulations in the past is like, as an analyst, you have to come up with, okay, what is the standard deviation of my gross margin, like distribution, essentially, and
Hmm.
that's hard to conceptually think through, and so it can introduce a lot of bias. I think if you have to assume what the median is, you have to assume the standard deviation of that input, and then you have to assume like the standard deviation of when did robotaxis launch and what is the vehicle growth CAGR. And so, you know, the methodology is fine, but I think it does introduce a lot of areas where you can put your thumb on the scale, even if it's inadvertent. For me, that was one of the problems I had when I used to do these types of models, was like I didn't have a good framework to think about what was a good standard deviation, like for an input like gross margin, especially in a fast changing world like Tesla's in right now. So
Yeah.
it's I don't want to dunk on it too much, because I think what they're doing is really helpful in a good contribution to the overall conversation. But I would say it doesn't really represent what I would view as like a bear case in their inputs or in their outputs.
Yeah. I see from Carl Branco says First Republic is exploring divesting 50 billion to 100 billion of long dated securities and mortgages as part of a broader rescue plan. So maybe this is showing signs. It looks like a lot of the banking stocks are kind of going down. What's that KBW, or what's that index? I should look at that. It looks like a lot of the financial stocks are being hit a little bit today. So yeah, it seems like there's more evidence of potential systemic risk
Do you
in the banking industry.
does that make it harder to do 25 basis points next week if we have First
I
Republic
think
doing
so.
this? I
I
mean,
think so. I think so. I think it seemed that there was reports that they were going to not raise rates if Credit Suisse didn't figure out a solution in the days leading up to the last meeting. So I think depending how, I think it's up in the air now. I think depending on how the next few days go, uh, there could certainly be a pause on interest rates now, and them signaling like we're going to raise rates again in June. They could signal that instead of this time, because we don't want to rush things, and maybe they really will raise 25 basis points again in June after this. But a pause now would be nice to show like some acknowledgement or validation from the Fed that this is not helping,
Yeah.
the
And
economy.
if they get more data in 2 months from now, decide to raise 25 basis points, then that's fine. Like, to
Yeah.
me, it's just they've been so dogmatic about raising rates so high, and
Yeah.
given
Yeah.
how much lag there is in their economic data, I find it very frustrating.
Yeah. I see boiled down after saying, wait, so bad news is really good news. We were in that realm for a while where bad news was really good news. My finger in the air says we're kind of exiting that where bad news is good news now that everyone's agreed that the top of interest rates is about where we are now. But it's possible that, bad news, will rally the market thinking that the Fed's going to pause now or start lowering rates soon. It's possible. But I kind of feel like bad news is really bad news again. We're kind of entering that territory soon.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
for the
we're getting
market.
to the point where earnings can be impacted by this stuff. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a really interesting earnings season, I think. I wouldn't
Yeah.
surprise me if we've got a lot of volatility after we get some more reports coming in the next couple weeks.
Yeah. This week is, this week and next week are huge. The earnings season, the main event. So the market, I hope it takes direction from earnings season versus results and guidance versus just interest rate,
Yeah.
speculation. So yeah, we'll see today. Microsoft juggernaut after the bell. I think Apple is this week sometime, right? So we got Google, I think tomorrow or something. So you got a lot of big juggernauts this week reporting. Um, we'll see. So we got a couple more things. We'll do some Q&A. I don't know if people have questions. They can start typing them in the YouTube comments. I see a lot of good comments. But one thing we want to talk about is Twitter, right? Elon and Twitter. And Tucker Carlson, the biggest name in news, the biggest single individual. You could say he's, I think, by far the most influential single person in all of, quote unquote, news media. Big news, right? He and Fox News have departed ways. It's hard to say. It's hard to know who left who. I can't quite tell yet. You can make arguments both ways, I guess, but that's big news. And then Don Lemon, to a much lesser degree, is not nearly as big of a person as he once was or is now today, even compared to Tucker Carlson in terms of how many million people are following and watching him regularly and such. But he's still a big name that also left CNN. Maybe he's going to make a comeback. And we kind of think both these people, or I think they could be they could use Twitter as their platform for content going forward and be in charge of their own content instead of having a boss themselves to have to answer to, whether it's CNN or Fox. They could be their own content bosses and use the Twitter platform, sort of like Apple Store has the Apple App Store platform, and developers build their own stuff and put it on the Apple. Just certain guidelines they have to follow, but they get to create their own content or their own experiences. Well, Tucker and Don Lemon, maybe this could be the beginning of some big people coming to Twitter for that. Any thoughts, Matt? What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's been a lot of speculation about that, and I think they certainly could, start using the subscriptions and that sort of thing. My own sense is, like, who knows more about how to monetize your personality than Mr. Beast? Like, he's by far the expert on this front in my mind. And in that
Yeah.
Lex Friedman interview he did a couple months ago, his point of view was like, listen, they've got absolutely nothing on YouTube. Like, YouTube has all the eyeballs, they've got the AdWords, they've got like the best monetization tools. And so, like, he's focusing the majority of his effort on monetizing that platform. Now, he's also like ventured out into like TikTok and a couple other things and figured out how to do reasonably well on there. But to me, it seems like as exciting as what Elon's been doing on Twitter recently is, and I think you're definitely starting to see some people actually make money from it, which is a great step. But I would imagine if I'm one of those individuals, I would probably prioritize YouTube over
Yeah.
Twitter. Although you probably
They
do
could do
both.
both.
You
Yeah, just
probably
like
do
we're doing
both.
now. Yeah.
But I would imagine probably like 90% or more of your income would come through that way. I mean, if you look at like Breaking Points, for example, they're a good example of a analogous, kind of organization that kind of came from traditional news media. They have their own take. They didn't want to be, given talking points essentially that to follow both on the conservative and on the liberal side. And so they just kind of did their own thing or in charge of their own destiny. And then they're doing really well on that. And so to me, it's like they both, Crystal and Sagar, are the folks who started that. they both use Twitter to some extent, but mostly they're driving traffic to YouTube is my
Yeah.
impression. So I
I think
think
Elon
Elon's got
wants
a
to
long
change
road
that, though.
here. He
He wants
wants
to
to.
change
I just think
that.
it's going to be a long road. Yeah.
I hope it's not a long road. I hope it's just like a technology change they can implement quickly. Twitter, the whole platform, the whole system development of it is sort of described it as a fractal Rube Goldberg machine. So, given that, maybe
Yeah.
it's much harder than I think to implement YouTube like services within Twitter. I know they're already starting to do that. I see Steve Mark Ryan and other. I think Farzad just signed up as a subscriber. I saw James Stevenson. These kind of they're almost like beta testers trying to help get this going. So maybe if they can get it up to par, Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon will do both, because I think that's what you do. You do both. You do YouTube and Twitter,
Yeah.
and then over time, let the market decide, let the audience decide where they prefer to watch the same content on Twitter or YouTube. I think Twitter has the long-term advantage in the censorship issues that you have on YouTube
Yeah.
and Facebook and such. So Twitter does not have that issue, and I think Tucker Carlson in particular would really like that aspect of Twitter. So I hope Elon and the team at Twitter are getting this fractal Rube Goldberg machine up to speed for the YouTube like service for these people. So that'd be great. We'll see.
I hope so. Although I will say Elon has broken trust with some of the people on that. I mean, the whole Matt Taibbi thing with Substack, I think that really rubbed a
Yeah.
lot of people the wrong way. And somebody pointed out recently, and I thought this was an excellent point, that Elon has spoken the game of making the Twitter algorithm entirely open source. In fact, they actually posted the algorithm to GitHub so people could take a look at it. But after they did that, that's when they started blocking all of the links to Substack. So there was some disconnect between what was in the open source model and Twitter's actual actions in the live algorithm. And so for someone like Matt Taibbi, who was like, "Hey, I thought we're on like team free speech here, and
Yeah.
like transparency of, even if like you want to have Substack be limited for some reason, like make that really transparent." And I think Elon definitely made people cautious with the way that whole thing was handled, and kind of saying that Taibbi was an employee of Substack. So I don't know. I do think he's maybe hasn't handled that particular situation too well, and I wonder if that might slow down his ambitions a little bit.
Yeah, we don't have all the information behind the scenes of what happened there. It's possible that Matt Taibbi was really being sneaky and trying to do stuff under the table behind Elon's back. I don't know Taibbi, that well. I haven't listened to him enough to have a judgment of character, but I do feel like I've listened to Elon enough where he's authentic, and I think he has good character and is a loyal type of person. And I think he wouldn't accuse someone or be so accusatory of someone without proper evidence or belief. But who knows where his state of mind is? Maybe he's just so overworked and so pressured right now that anyone can make him snap on them. It's hard to say
Yeah,
for sure. So yeah, I
but
mean, I guess
yeah,
that maybe it plays out over time. We'll know more in time about what actually happened with Matt Taibbi there.
he did have I'm subscribed to his like weekly newsletters that he does, and so he gave some more kind of context in there. And I won't rehash everything in this forum, but he was essentially saying that he had no idea what the Substack competition of Twitter even was, because he just uses it as a platform. So possible
Yeah.
he was lying, but given his history, I really don't think that was the case. And I think Elon had to make a snap decision, and probably didn't realize how it would be interpreted
Yeah.
from people who are looking at it just from a different lens.
Yeah. And Elon does change his mind, when he's wrong, when he knows he's wrong. Just like
So
he
there's
will
hope
in
for advertising.
advertising. Yeah, just like he will in public education advertising. I've seen him do it numerous times. So
Yep.
the other historic event, before we get a Q&A, the other historic event we didn't talk about is a Starship success. I think wild success of Starship. Like, it was almost a guarantee that thing was not going to get to orbit. I think it was very low chances. Any
Yeah.
of the SpaceX engineers, I think they would tell you too, that it was very slim chances they knew that it would get to actual orbit. They were just happy that it got off the launch pad, and it did much more. It got past Max Q. I mean, such a
Yep.
huge success. I hardly hear, like, I've talked to a number of people, other parents I know, and people in the community that aren't, fans of that aren't fanatics of everything Elon does like I am and follow everything he does, and they're completely unaware of the Starship thing. It's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like one news headline in the morning. If you missed the news headline for that few minutes, you're not aware of it. So it's kind of disappointing that a bigger deal of such a huge American success story has not been in the news. I don't quite get it.
Yeah. Did you watch it with your family?
I did. I watched it with me and my two of my kids. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
really
I did
cool.
too. It's just, it's such a memory making item. I'm excited for my kids to be able to talk to their kids one day and be like, "Yeah, I saw the very first Starship launch ever,"
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and it was just so much fun to watch. I mean, like from the moment the engines fired up, I was like, "That thing is not really moving." I was like, "Is it going to just explode
yeah,
right there?" It was just
yeah. And
so
then
slow
how
getting off the launch pad.
it was exciting because you knew it was probably going to crash at some point. You just wanted it to
Yeah,
crash later than everyone expected it to, which it did. But it was cool at that point of the crash. When it would start flipping in the air.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
couldn't quite tell. Is this like part of the plan? I couldn't quite tell for a little bit, but after like the third flip, I was like, no, this is not part of the plan.
Yeah,
and
they had
and
all the
yeah.
metrics on there too, and I could see the altitude just plummeting. I was like, okay, yeah, this is not looking
Yeah,
good.
yeah. It started plumbing. I was like, uh-oh. Then I started getting serious. Like, I hope that whatever fail safe they have to like blow it up or make sure is working and it's not gonna like suddenly blow up
Yeah,
on mainland USA or something. That would be terrible disaster. I mean, it was an
it did.
OSHA as it should have.
It took longer for it to explode than I thought it would. I mean, after it was tumbling for a
Yeah.
while, I was like, when's this thing gonna blow?
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
finally did, and my kids were like, yay! But it was even.
Yeah, and just think how big this monumental building is, like, turning in the air like that so rapidly. It's just insane to think about.
It in the view from the engines, when it was like that view of all the engines that were cut out, and just like
Yeah,
I was just surprised at how different the methane, seemed to glow compared to the normal, RP1 or kerosene that's used on most rockets. It's just such a different look to it. It was just, I don't know. It was like very. It struck me in a very profound way to just like look at this and be like,
yeah,
oh, this is the first time we've seen this configuration of engines that's going to potentially be so transforming to life on Earth and beyond. It's
yeah.
just, it's what a time to be alive. It's
Now,
just so exciting.
just a question to ponder, for the audience. I'm curious what your comments are, something to think about with the other space enthusiast friends. What is more historic of a moment for SpaceX or for the space industry, space-faring civilization in general? Which of these two moments is more important? Is it the first reusable rocket landing on the pad successfully, or is it the first Starship going up into orbit, let's say the next time or the time after when they get one up to orbit? Which is more historic of a milestone, would
So
you say, for a
you,
space faring civilization?
you're saying if the booster lands back on the pad,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
what's
Yeah, the booster lands back on the pad to lower the costs on one point, and or the Starship, the hugest rocket by far that they can like. Basically, it seems like from a maximal like physics point of view, this is like the limit of how big you can send something up to space or something. Matt Elon's done like the calculations, and this is what he's determined is the limit of the size of something you can send up there or something. And if he sends that up, you
I
know,
to me, it would be landing the second stage. That's the big milestone, because that's the thing
yeah,
that we've never done before. We've
yeah,
landed
that's true.
boosters before, but landing the second stage, especially with like the ridiculous flip that it has to do and these heat
Yeah,
shield tiles.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
Both are
I'm going
needed, but which one is
off
more
the.
important? Yeah,
I think landing the Starship, because landing
yeah.
the Starship, I guess it presumes that you've reached orbit.
Yeah.
So I might be cheating a little bit there, but to me that's the really important thing. That's the thing that SpaceX, as amazing as the Falcon 9
Yeah.
is, it's
I
still
could
tens of millions of
argue
dollars per launch.
I could argue in the distant future if you could never solve that problem, if that was not solvable, let's say. I could also though argue in the distant future, yeah, I think that's more important, but in the distant future you could still have a space-faring civilization if you sent up a few of these rockets like as one-way machines, that couldn't
Yeah.
come back. If you sent them like, hundreds of them or dozens of them or whatever with like a bunch of Tesla bots in there that were like super sophisticated and knew how to like recreate things on Mars and mine things on Mars and do everything themselves and solar power themselves on Mars and then they could just build things on Mars for you in a way where humans could have a one-way trip to
Them-
Mars. you know?
Imagine how, like, so you got a 2-year like launch window. Imagine if you've got some auto GPT type of like AI program with these
Yeah.
physical Tesla bots, so they can just be working and like figuring out new tasks to do and being like, oh, we were going to build a base over here, but the geography is not quite right, so we're going to like reprioritize our plan and go over here. And then
Yeah.
they're working for 2 years to like build up the infrastructure. Like
Yeah.
that sounds so science fiction, but
We're
like there's nothing really limiting that from happening now. We've got all the
yeah.
technology is proven,
Yeah.
not quite to that level yet, but like it's very close.
Very
So
close.
just it's just the implications are astounding. It's just
Yeah.
it's going to be absolutely wild.
Gonna be wild. We'll see it in our lifetimes, I think, which is exciting. Um, so I don't know. Anything else, or should we just go to Q&A? I think maybe we should
Yeah,
spend some
we've
time
gone a
on the
bit
Q&A.
over already, so why
Yeah.
don't we jump over to Q&A?
Yeah. All right. First question from Barbecued Veggies on Twitter. How you doing? One of our favorite followers that we correspond with here on a lot. What are your thoughts on the lithium mining and refining debate? Elon's argument is that lithium is highly abundant, hence Tesla should focus on refining. However, abundance does not equate to the ability to readily mine and retrieve lithium from the earth. Matt, I know you've dug into this a bit and you've had some concern. I have not dug into it, and I sort of am willing to trust Elon on this one, that he's sort of telling the truth and knows a lot more than even what I could dig into on this one. But I don't know enough to have a really informed opinion, other than saying I trust Elon. So I'm
Yeah.
open to ideas. I'm open. What do you think, Matt?
So I wish he would go beyond the point of just saying that lithium is highly abundant, because like that's obviously true, but that doesn't mean that the lithium miners are just wasting their time by like mining it the way that they are, instead of just like having it magically appear somehow. And so
Hmm.
to me, he has historically kind of skirted the question. So it's very clear that he believes that refining is the bottleneck, and I believe that that's true for the next 2 years, but I don't believe that's
Hmm.
true for the next 5 years. And so the disconnect, that the more I've dug into this, that it just seems more glaring, is that you can get a new gigafactory online, you can get a new refining plant online in maybe 2 years, but historically the time to get a new mine online is more like 10 years. And so if you're going to be growing 10x or 20x your lithium demand over the next 10-year period, um, like you should have a decent amount of visibility into what that future lithium supply might look like. And the people in the industry who are like tracking this stuff most closely say there's nowhere near enough lithium coming online to support like a 20x increase. And even if you kind of give the benefit of the doubt to like, hey, some of these mines can get online in 5 years or something like that, then you still fall short. So that to me is the disconnect, is the lead time to get the new plants up and running. I mean, Elon has spoken at great length of how, as like the price rises, it incentivizes new miners to come online, and so then they find more reserves, and like all that stuff is true in the long run. But in the medium term, the next 10 years to get to Tesla's 20 million units by 2030, there it seems to me that there's not enough mining capacity coming online within that time frame to hit that goal. And people who know way more about this than me, including Jordan from The Limiting Factor and Josh's Blonde, they cover this stuff in much more depth, and they've completely been on board of this view that there's not enough lithium supply coming online, which makes Tesla's 20 million unit goal highly unlikely in their minds. So that's a concern that I have.
Seems valid. Yeah.
And that's the point that I've never heard Elon like respond to. It's sure, we agree there's tons of lithium, but like how are you actually going to get it out of the ground?
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah. From Just for Funds on the YouTube comments, question: it seems inventory levels in the US are still elevated. Thoughts on how low Tesla will let quarterly cash flow go this year to maintain volume growth? Yeah, I mean, volume growth, I think you got to keep it at maximum capacity. I don't think you want to I don't think I agree with Elon. You don't want to um, sacrifice volume growth for keeping prices high, right? But I think they could educate the public to continue volume growth as maximum capacity while keeping prices stagnant, or even it would raise prices, I would think, potentially, if they advertise, did some public education on EVs, 101 public education on EVs, but Yeah, I mean, I think inventory levels in the US are still elevated, and that really concerns me that there's more price cuts right around the corner, and why I think it's highly likely, and why I think as a result, the stock is likely not to rebound significantly anytime soon. I feel terrible for all the retail investors, all the people following us, all the people that have come to know Tesla and love it and bought a lot of the stock in the last 2 or 3 years, because it could be a while before they're in the green, and some of these people are going to lose patience and just get out after it's dropped, and miss the opportunity of a lifetime. And you could say, oh yeah, it's their fault. No, but you got to have some empathy for these people. We were all there. We've all been beginner investors at some point. And it doesn't mean, it's almost like Tesla could do more for sure to keep themselves from sacrificing margins so much, right now. And they could also at the same time accelerate the mission. The whole diatribe, we did in the beginning, basically, in essence, it's tragic in my mind for a lot of reasons. But for me personally, on my long-term shares, I'm not worried for those shares. But for a lot of the community, I'm a little concerned. And for for people who manage money and the money we manage, it's stressful for sure too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this time last year we were looking at 2023 and just thinking, wow, this is going to be a breakout year. Even as we assumed there'd be price cuts, but we
Yeah.
didn't assume they'd have to drop prices like 30% or whatever. And so
Yeah.
that just cut our earnings
Inventory is
estimates
still
like more
still
than in
rising
half. And
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, the fact that you've got these IRA incentives and these massive price cuts, and you're still seeing inventory rise in the U.S., it's really not a healthy sign, I think.
It screams lack of public education. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, we could be in a negative free cash flow situation, which is crazy to think about, given like that Tesla was such a cash cow for so long. But if they're gonna, continue to expand at such a huge rate, and production is going to continue to exceed deliveries, and you're going to have this inventory buildup, then at lower margins, then like that's just simple math. You can get to negative free cash flow territory. So then your mountain of cash that you've built up is just going to be dwindling down. So I hope that doesn't happen. It doesn't have to happen. But I think if nothing changes and they just kind of stick to this course of, we'll do like a 5% price cut every 2 months. Yeah, we're in negative free cash flow territory, I think, which
Yeah.
is
Death
insane.
Death by a thousand price cuts. That's what keeps coming to my mind. Death by a thousand cuts, and that's what's happening to margins, and as a result to the stock price for Tesla for a while. So yeah, I would never short Tesla. That's not what I would ever do. Just because I believe in the long term so much. But if I was a true like speculator and not as believing in the mission and just a fan for so long, I would absolutely be shorting Tesla, going into the earnings and for now too, just because I think there's a good chance we go lower for longer than most bulls anticipate here. And I
So
think at the end,
it's
there's light at the end of the tunnel. Cybertruck, once that gets ramped up a year from now, maybe it's 18 months from now, once it gets ramped up, that's a walking advertisement, not, of sparking curiosity. And that's what's needed to drum up demand. What were you going to say, Matt?
I was going to say, it sounds like you're making the inverse Powell prediction that, he's saying rates are going to be higher than people think for longer than they want. And you're saying
Yeah.
Tesla's going to be lower than people think for longer than they want.
Yeah.
But
I hope
in
I'm
the end, they'll
wrong. I
both
hope I'm wrong.
reverse.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a probability on everything. My probability for that is like 75%, so I could certainly be wrong, but I'm not
Yeah.
going to bet
And
against Tesla. Yeah.
on the flip side, like, so I completely agree with you. Short term is looking bleak, but I'm incredibly optimistic about the long term. I mean, the way FSD
Absolutely.
is evolving
Yeah.
is just so impressive. And even if FSD doesn't come to fruition, at some point the economy is going to stabilize much more than it has. Public sentiment will turn around eventually, whether it's just because more people get educated, via like grassroots efforts, or Tesla actually does an advertising campaign. Like, the truth is going to win out. It's just a matter of how long. So I think
Mhm.
demand, in 2024, 2025, will be more reasonable than it is right now. And then on top of that, you've got mega packs ramping, which we've already talked about in detail. That's, like 40 to $50 billion of revenue per year in the next couple of years at decent margins. And I think the take rate's going to for autonomy is going to increase from essentially like 6%, something like that today. Even if it's only 15, 20%, that has a huge impact. And if they actually do put all the pieces together and can figure out robotaxi, then we're in, ARC valuation territory, which is going to make this short-term pain, look like a distant memory.
Yeah, I mean, how exciting will it be? The stock might, if there's no more price cuts, if we're wrong and Tesla does not do more price cuts for whatever reason, then it's possible the stock starts rebounding and appreciating back towards $200. But we anticipate more price cuts, and I think if there's one or two more price cuts this quarter, which I think are both very realistic probabilities, and third quarter as well, another price cut, let's say, or whatever, I think there's a very good chance we get cut from a 500 billion, a half a trillion market cap valuation to like a 200 billion market cap valuation temporarily, and if that happens, that would be the buying opportunity of a lifetime if you have dry powder. I don't really have dry powder, but if you did, it would be, I hope the people that do, it'll be an incredible ride for them.
Yeah.
So last question, let's do one more. We're going a long time here. This question is from David Casman. How you doing, David? I read your comments a lot. I don't read them out loud, but you have good quality comments. I appreciate it, and the compliments and such from time to time. So question, if you set up your ad campaign, how would you evaluate whether it's successful? That's a great question. There are people that are, do this for a living. And Tesla Boomer Mama, I don't know if you follow her, but I subscribed to her like Substack or something a while back. And so I get like an email from her once a month or once a week or something. And the most recent one she sent a couple days ago was from a friend of hers or someone that is in the advertising industry that knows exactly this, and gave a lot of specifics around that and all this lingo that I'm learning within advertising. I don't really want to dive into it and like take up the bandwidth of my brain to become like an expert in advertising, but there's a whole different class of lingo. In my mind, there's easy ways to evaluate whether it's successful or not. From based on what I've read, there's well-established ways to evaluate it, whether it's through, I forget the lingo, but there's ways to describe advertising blasted out to the entire public versus targeted advertising just to specific people. I think Tesla should go the way of blasting out to the entire public on this, to be honest. I think people say, oh, that's a waste. People don't watch TV. Well, you know what? The price of TV advertising should have come down proportionally if it's a waste. So it would be cost effective, I would think, by now. Yeah, I think I'm not worried about the results. I think the results would be dramatically effective. I think Tesla may even have to raise. I think there's a case to be made that Tesla would have to raise prices significantly just because the wait times could suddenly start creeping up to 2, 3, 6 months again, and they'd have to raise prices to make sure the wait times don't go beyond that again. And then if that happened, it would be a domino effect because margins would, the writing would be on the wall that there's a higher demand in the public than everyone thought. Margins can stay high. You have Rivian stay alive longer. You have GM, Ford, other legacy automakers reinvest more money into their next generation EV platforms, which causes a whole bunch of lithium miners to see the writing on the wall to say, let's mine more lithium, like you were talking about, and refiners, and the whole ecosystem of batteries gets supercharged, if the margins stay healthy. If you squeeze margins, then the whole ecosystem of batteries is not going to be supercharged. It's just going to be what Tesla is trying to get off of, at decent market. It's just, to me, the mission is better served if you can educate the public sooner than later. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, somebody in the comments says, like, if you Tesla blasted ads to everybody in this chat room, they wouldn't see one extra sale. And that's true. It's like you need to, I feel like the best use of targeted ads is on like, Facebook or Twitter and YouTube. And
Instagram, TikTok
are probably more likely than the broader population to be aware of the, of Teslas in general. And maybe they have a strong opinion of Elon one way or another. I think what you're missing is like the people who do watch like normal TV and that sort of thing. So I agree with you. I mean, like that seems like it's worthwhile to do, but I would also say like try both. Like do like a mainstream ad, try that for 30 days and then try a targeted ad and try that for like 30 days and kind of see what your ROI is on the difference or on both platforms. But to me, it just seems mind-boggling that they put in their investor deck last year how they got all these sales from advertising, and then they never tried to do it themselves. They talked
Yeah.
about the bump they got after the Super Bowl. And it's like, you've
Yeah.
got data right there that like mainstream TV advertising on the Super Bowl works.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you try that? So it's
Yeah.
just,
They're not even advertising Teslas. They're advertising something else. And just
yeah.
that's just educating the public. That's examples of educate. Tesla could just educate the public, not even Tesla specific, right? What if they just did some kind of like charity public education of EVs in general? That would be a nice look. Elon, I would think from a
Mhm.
moral perspective on advertising would think that's okay, right? But Tesla would disproportionately benefit greatly from that, obviously, because as people research EVs, they see Tesla's the best, just like you saw from the Super Bowl commercials that were
Yeah.
not Tesla ads.
Yep. Yep.
So, all right. Well, and the word advertising, that's just brutal. Like the word crypto for digital assets, that's not a good word. The word advertising just has such a negative connotation amongst too many people that I think I'm trying to displace it with public education campaign as much as possible because that I think rings much more true to the situation with Tesla. You have the best product out there, but no one knows it exists. It's crazy.
Or just go the other way, like Elon's been talking about lately, and get ahead of propaganda, right?
Yeah.
That's something
Yeah.
he's been talking about. Just make it
Yeah.
a joke.
Yeah. You know what the next thing, just so I was gonna say is I think who was it? Elon, but everyone Farzad's been on fire with Elon responding to him lately. I guess he's like,
Yeah, he has been. He's in the
congrats
in
to
crowd.
Farzad. He's on the in crowd, but he doesn't disagree. When you disagree with Elon, you're kicked out of the in crowd. I think so. He's careful. He's got to not, maybe he really agrees. I don't know, but maybe if he disagrees, he's choosing not to ever kind of do that, which would be wise, I think anyway, in his position in some respects. But anyway, Farzad said something like, yeah, AI. I hope AI likes us, and it struck me like I think in the future we're going to be saying like I hope the alignment likes us, because it's really the AI
Yeah.
itself is not deciding anything. I think we all know the AI is not, a consciousness. I think people are going to realize that it's whatever the alignment is, that's what's going to hopefully like us. Not that the AI itself is sort of an inaccurate term in that case, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I agree.
Weird thought to end on. Sorry, just it occurred to me we were talking about weird stuff. So,
All right. Well, let's lighten it up then. One comment that's cracking me up: who in the Tesla Bowl community has the best voice for an advertisement voiceover?
ooh,
So who's got like a low, attractive voice for something like that?
I don't know. We gotta maybe someone in the comments could say, yeah, I don't know. I do
think
kind of
Stephen
like
Mark
Jordan.
Ryan just has a very interesting. Oh, Jordan, that's a good voice. Stephen
Jordan
Mark
has a
Ryan's
very
not a low
calming
voice.
voice.
He does.
I think
Yeah,
Jordan
yeah.
from the Limiting Factor, very low comment. I like his voice. I think that's good. That's the best one I can think of. I don't know. Can you think of anyone?
That's a great call. I was gonna say Stephen Mark Ryan just because he's got like such a catchy, like he's so
Yeah.
engaging. So
Farzad is actually good too. He's got a good inflection of his tone. He can talk convincingly with that, I think, in a realistic way.
I can't support Farzad. No.
Yeah. I think those would be good. I see a lot of options there. Gordon Johnson. Yeah. No, not Gordon Johnson. Yeah. So, I don't know. We can have people submit ideas for advertising ideas. One day, if there was a commercial on national TV, I would love it. But it's probably going to be too late by then. Cybertruck will be around the corner, but it needs to be yesterday, or in the next very soon to really be meaningful. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, next week we'll see you all next week, right? We're both on next.
Yep.
We're here. Okay. All right, guys. We'll see you all next week. Thanks for hanging around for so long today. We didn't have a hard stop. So.